now the time for Professor Mike Postlers to holding the next sessions. In fact, there are little bad news. Mr. Charles having some things in the office, and they leaving the office and with excuse, except the apology from Mr. Charles Ross, the president of IMBA, as a leading organization supporting innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem in the United States and worldwide. I think Dr. Marco is there. He can start till Mr. Nathan's joining us. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so I believe what Hanadi just said is one of the presenters is not going to be here. Is that correct, Hanadi? Charles Ross will not be here.
Yes, yes.
Okay, we only had 3 presenters in this session, so now we're down to 2. We have a full hour. I believe Marco is set to go now. And Marco, if you need to go over the allotted 20 minutes, since we have extra time, please feel free to do so. I'm going to try to stimulate some questions and conversations after both of these speakers, again, since we do have some extra time here. So without delay, I'm going to welcome Marco from Finland. I hope you're here, Marco.
Discussion till Marco is joining. He is not in seat. Let me text Marco. You can start discussion.
Okay. How about Nathan? Is Nathan here?
I think Nathan will join on time. Still, we have 20 minutes.
Okay, he'll be here at 10:20. Okay, so we're trying to get a hold of Marco, and Charles isn't here. So what do we do?
Michael, what is your organization?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. So I'm a finance professor at Stockton University, which is in New Jersey, just outside of Atlantic City. I'm a professor of finance. My research has been done with Hanadi in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. I teach a class in the MBA program in new ventures. And the way I run the class, they break down into groups, typically 3 or 4 people, and they're tasked with coming up with an idea for a business. And some of the students, this is an academic exercise. Some of the students, they actually go forth with this. So the first thing the group has to do is come up with an idea. Then I show them how to do a feasibility study to make sure that the idea truly represents an opportunity. So is there a market for this? Is it economically feasible? That is, it will be profitable. And I try to emphasize to the students that they really should look for ventures that appear to be extremely profitable. And I tell them, if you look into a market and it's just sort of marginally profitable because you're brand new and into the business, as smart as you are and as well planned as you may have done things, you're still going to make some mistakes. And the mistakes typically are costly. Well, if you have a venture that's very profitable and you make a few mistakes, it turns out to be just profitable. But if you start out with one that's just sort of marginally profitable and you make mistakes, then you're going to turn into losses. So they have an idea. We do the feasibility study to see whether the idea is truly an opportunity. And then if it is an opportunity, then we go into doing a full-blown business plan. And most of the course is spent on teaching each of the parts of the business plan that are necessary. And then the last 2 weeks of the class, each group presents their business plan. Usually it's a PowerPoint presentation too, presents their business plan to the class. And I say to the class, look, you're investors and you're considering investing in these business plans and these ventures that are being presented today. So at the end of the class, would you invest? And of course, why would you and why wouldn't you invest? So by the time the students get out of the class, they at least understand maybe they're going to go forth with these projects. And I have had probably half a dozen or so that have been very successful. But even if you don't go forward with it, you've now learned how an entrepreneur has to think. And even if you go into business or whatever you end up doing, today, everybody really needs that entrepreneurial spirit and that entrepreneurial type of thinking. Even if you work in a large corporation, we use the term entrepreneurship if you're working within a large corporation, but still the corporations have to have a very entrepreneurial mindset because everything is changing so rapidly. Today, technology, and we've heard a whole lot of papers here being presented on how technology is being used and how artificial intelligence is coming in and how the whole marketplace is changing. And business owners and leaders, of course, have to be able to respond to that. In the US today, and I would assume in many other parts of the world, after the lockdown due to COVID, everybody went home and started working remotely. Now, many of those people have come back, but there's now a trend from some of the workers to say, look, I'm looking for a little better work-life balance. And working at home means I don't have to even get real dressed up to go to work. It's all done over Zoom. I get dressed up here and wear shorts the rest of the way. And I don't have any travel time going back and forth to work. So the workers are arguing we want a better work-life balance, and we can get that if we're able to work at home at least part of the time. Now, some of the companies are saying, well, we're not so sure this is a good idea, and we're worried about how productive the workers will be. I looked up some studies as much as I could find, and I think what I saw is right after the lockdown and people started working at home, productivity went way up. So it was actually an increase in productivity from people working home in the beginning. But now the most recent work I've seen is exactly the opposite, that the workers are less productive now than before. So that's what I do. I teach finance as my main subject, but I do have this new ventures class that is the most fun class for me to teach. I teach it every spring. I actually look forward to it. And I like to listen.
Professor Mike,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Mr. Marco ready to present as a first presenter till Mr. Nathan join. And we can continue the discussion after the presentation. Go ahead,
Terrific.
Marco.
Marco
is a best audience and speaker. He is joining us from early stage from the first day, 12 hours every day. More than welcome, Professor, from rough. Finland. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Can I share the screen? Or good afternoon or good evening. I don't know where you are because this is so vast audience. Can I share the screen?
Hanadi, you have to make it so everybody can share, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Is it sharing?
Yes. Very good.
Did it happen something?
Looks like it's working well, Marco. I can see it. I'm assuming everybody else can.
So let's go. Thank you again for this brilliant possibility of being with you. You have been doing an outstanding and fantastic job, and managing very well the challenges with technology and our being biological beings, you see. So I want to have a special thanks for Dr. Nadi and Fernando, old friend. And here we go. Since this initiative is related with the International Virtual Conference on Innovation, Technology, and Artificial Intelligence, so I thought that maybe the angle of Finland in providing capital could be interesting. So here we go. I will try to do it in a very fast mode. I will handle the logic a bit, why the Nordic countries, they have a secret sauce for success. And then we'll invite you to be present or e-present here. And then I will go for the specifics of the providers of equity and debt and grants here in Finland that you might be interested on. And when I say Finland, then you can check Sweden, Norway, Denmark. They have the similar type of juridic animals. And then I will just go briefly for the special case of artificial intelligence in Finland, then questions and answers, and that's it. So let's go. Put your seats because this will be very fast. So you are very welcome to Finland and to the Nordic countries to access them. They will love to hear about your ideas and your projects. One of the things that you will find here in the Nordic countries is that we value the persons by what they are, and we really don't care what they have, you see. So if they have and they are, it's fine, but if they just have, is not so cool thing. Here, better is much better than more. I felt in love with the Nordic countries when I was selected in the year 90 to represent Portugal in Norway in the International Students Festival in Trondheim. And then I have the pleasure and the opportunity of meeting personally the Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland. Then I managed to come here, and then I got married here in '98, and I am living here with my goddess, and everything is fine, even with this strange neighbor that we have here. So here in Finland, we evaluate very much organization over cleverness and intelligence. You see, so if you are organized, is much better than if you are clever or intelligent. Then here, the other thing that is nice is that when you say yes, that means yes. When you say no, that means no. It's clear talk. We don't understand conversations about tax evasion, small talk, wasting resources. This is not our thing. It's a very children-centric society, you see, so children are the top, children are the best in the world. And I have to admit that this intersubjectivity of innovation that the Nordic countries developed must be one of the top inventions of the Homo sapiens in the last 350,000 years. And here we go. I am putting the fourth year now. So you can be in the Nordic countries by being present through the traditional way of foreign direct investment, alone or with partners, or through the special mechanism that Estonia developed, that is a Baltic countries in the south of Finland, that is called e-presence. You can be here digitally. So think about it. Then where do you can get equity from Finland? First, you can go straight to FinFund. And as you see, FinFund has got these investments around the world, and they target very much emerging markets. So how do I get to the next? Oops. Okay, so the next stop can be TESI, and one of the things of the Nordic countries is that we are very transparent, you see. So I am putting here the names of the persons that you can contact directly. You don't have to do it through me. You can go there. Then the PDF can be available for all of you. And then if you click in the images, you go straight to the places. So we don't waste time. And this TESI has got one particular interesting thing that, for instance, if you want to establish a private equity fund or a venture capital fund here in Finland, if you allocate 10 million, then they allocate 10 million as well. If you allocate 5 million, they allocate 5 million as well. So, and as long you pass the due diligence, you can do it. So then the next, you can address the business angels network here that is huge. And here again, you have the contact. You can go direct to the director of the Business Angels Association. If you want, you can go directly for equity to the Venture Capital Association of Finland, where you have lots of asset management and lots of fund managers on private equity and on venture capital that you can access. You just study them and then approach them. Make sure that you did the study before, so you don't make mass proposals, you see, because they don't like to waste time. Then the next thing, we are entering the depth. So we saw the places for equity that you can access, and then and by the way, I invest as well, but that is another story. Then we are entering in the world of the debt. So if you want to get debt, so you have Finvera here in Finland and the Nordic Investment Bank. Just for your curiosity, take a look to the Nordic Investment Bank balance sheet and to the World Bank balance sheet, and then tell me. Regarding banks, you have the largest bank in the Nordic countries, which is Nordea Bank, which comes from the idea of Nord idea. So that's it. And then you have Danske that is based in Denmark, and then Evli Bank that you will see later on more things. Then these two other banks, Bank of Ireland and Actia Savings Bank, Carnegie Investment Bank, and Alexander Corporate Finance Bank. In my second presentation today, you will see the founder of Alexander Corporate Finance. Then you have BNP Paribas, Fortis, Pop Bank Group, and then you have a bonus. We jump already from the debt side to the grant side. So if you are looking for grants, you can access to the Association of Finnish Foundation, which has got something like 800 funders. You see, so the only thing, you just have to do your homework to study each of them, to see what is your unique selling proposition, and go be selective, don't make mass emails and whatever. Make sure that is a people-to-people relation. Then more funding, because I have been seeing in these 3 days that there are persons from the academy as well, and these persons from the academy, they can access to these grants as well. Academy of Finland, Sitra, EduFi, and again the Council of the Finnish Founders. By the way, you might not be giving great attention to the grants, but remember that Google was funded with grants first. You see, so they start to lure Larry Page and Sergey Brin with grants mechanism, and then after that they were invited for the venture capital community. So next, then you have this type of grants as well for research and development, for cooperation between companies, when companies they have common projects, when you are exploring more different things. And then you have for youngsters, for energy, and then for growth energy engines, and then material audit funding. You see, so very specific things that they have funding. You see, so whenever they feel that there is something that might be a source of unicorn, then they are in. Then you have more examples, and then more examples here as well. And then you have this one, this Finn partnership, which is another source of grants, and in certain cases debt, and in certain cases equity as well, not directly but indirectly. Then you have another source for grants, which is Elokeshkus, that you can approach. And so there is no reason for you to don't come to develop your company in Finland. Just for you to have an idea, these 30 million persons have got a GDP bigger than Brazil, that they are 212 million. You see, so these 30 million, I'm sorry, the Nordic countries, we are 30 million persons with a GDP higher than Brazil with 212 million, and 60% bigger, larger GDP than India, which is by the end of this decade, the largest country in the world. So if you are thinking about internationalization and you are not in the Nordic markets, well, I don't comment here, I will comment privately. Regarding the artificial intelligence in Finland, these guys, they developed a project 4 years ago, imagine 4 years ago, to make sure that 1% of the Finnish population will get familiar with artificial intelligence. Who else in the world is doing this? Okay, next step. Now questions and answers. Beautiful city, Helsinki, that I strongly advise you to visit, and Suomenlinna, which is the fortress that is in Helsinki as well. And you are welcome. If you need something from Finland, please let me know. I will be pleased to help. See you in the next section. If you have any questions now, please address, or we can talk later. Thank you.
Very well done, Marco. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? Just chime in. Okay, I don't hear any. Let me ask something. So I've been trying to think about what is the best way for the government to help new entrepreneurs. So the government in most countries recognizes that new entrepreneurs are necessary. They create new businesses. Most new jobs are created by small businesses. So there's in most countries, I believe, there is a desire to try to help companies and entrepreneurs get started. So the entrepreneurs, usually their largest challenge is capital. So finding capital. So the government says, well, we want to help you with that. So I think based on what Marco said and what I've seen in the past, the government essentially has three choices. They can provide some kind of debt financing. In the US, we have what's called the Small Business Administration, and that's mostly how the government helps new businesses get started, by providing debt financing. Secondly, you could provide some kind of equity financing, and I'm not quite sure how that would be done. I believe, Marco, you said that the government in Finland provides some capital to some venture capitalists and perhaps some private equity firms, and then those firms now have sufficient capital to invest in new and growing businesses. So the second way is through some kind of equity. And the third way would be through grants. As you just mentioned a few minutes ago, there are a number of opportunities. So I'm trying to figure out of those three ways, debt, equity, or grants, which makes the most sense, which is the most efficient, and which would provide the best outcomes. So let me ask that question first. So out of those three, what do you think would be the best? That is equity, debt, or grants?
Okay, your question is extremely, but extremely important, because if we want to move the humankind forward, we have to give these wings to the, I don't call them entrepreneurs, I call them teamners. I have a book on that in 2009. You see, I call them teamers because there isn't such a thing as an individual fighting alone. He doesn't win any war. So the secret, my thinking is that what the Nordic countries do best is that they make sure that everybody, when they are 18 years old, they are useful for the society. They have a great educational system, so they know what to do. So when you are, for instance, I am Portuguese based, and it's amazing that the children, they just get out of home when they are getting married. Here in Finland, when they are 18, they just go out of home. That's it. So they want to be free. And one of the things that they do, because they go for education, and when they are educated, they feel their self-esteem is high. They don't depend on the parents because they can go to the state and ask for the loan to go to to study. So the parents, they don't have this hierarchy in terms of financial. It's just the hierarchies in terms of love. So when they feel robust inside, to go for asking the government entities to implement their ideas, and then when their ideas, they might fail 1, 2, 3 times, but somewhere on the process, the contributors to the Finnish tax base, we know that boy or that girl, that man or that woman, she will or he will succeed. You see, so the combination of the grants, the debts, or the equity is just the package that is there available for those that have been investing in education. You invest in education, then you can access to it. You don't invest in education, so these things, these possibilities, they are not available for you because you don't have the right mental model of how the world works.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think education is extremely important. And, the more education an individual has, not just do they have specific knowledge about how to do things, which is important, but by getting higher education and getting as much education as you can, what you really learn is critical thinking skills. And for an entrepreneur, especially to be successful, you really need those kind of skills. What I tell my students, look, you just spent months coming up with a business plan here, and it's very good. Everybody got a good grade. If you're implementing this, the business plan is out of date probably the minute you get started, because the assumptions that you made and the conditions that you assumed when you were putting the plan together turns out to be different in the real world. Well, how are you going to be successful? You have to have the critical thinking skills to be able to take what you thought was going to be the situation and turn it into what really is the situation. So I think it's wonderful, Marco, that Finland emphasizes education so much, and it is such an important thing, I think, going forward.
Professor Mike, thank you so much. Mr. Professor Marco, I think Mr. Ninthens, it's there. After he presenting, you can discuss as you wish. Hi, Mr. Ninthen. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is our great pleasure to have you in this largest conference worldwide focusing in economic diversification based on innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. Professor Mike, you can introduce Nathan.
Nathan? So Nathan, is that pronounced Ole?
Ole.
Ole, okay. Nathan Ole, a fellow American. So fire when ready, Nathan.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you today. Really excited about the conversations that are happening, and really very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I'm Nathan Ole. I'm the president and CEO of the International Economic Development Council. The IEDC is the world's largest economic development association with just over 4,800 members from across the world. We're a nonpartisan NGO membership organization specifically focused on economic development. And as a part of that, we provide rigorous certification and ethics standards across the economic development spectrum, including professional development opportunities for both individuals and for organizations. So we have certification programs for individuals as well as organizations. So as accredited economic development organizations is an accreditation that we provide to organizations. And then we have 2 professional development certification programs for individuals in the economic development field. One, which is more typical to the certified economic development profession, and then another specifically focused on entrepreneurship-led economic development called our EDP certification. Both of these certification programs provide opportunities for people to both pursue and address their own professional development opportunities, but also obviously to push forward economic development and entrepreneurship-led economic development activities across the world. Our members include local, state, tribal, provincial, and federal governments, private and public partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a variety of other institutions across the globe. And they really are centered around promoting economic well-being and quality of life for their communities by creating high-quality jobs, developing vibrant communities, and improving the quality of life in their regions. Today, I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship-led economic development in particular. I'll talk a little bit about our certification programs, which anyone across the globe is eligible to participate in, as well as some strategies for leading economic development efforts with a focus on entrepreneurship in your communities. So the EDP certification that the IEDC provides, that entrepreneurship-led economic development certification, is a hands-on training and exam that empower participants to design and implement entrepreneurship-led economic development strategies relevant to their own communities. It demonstrates that professionals can make a difference through entrepreneurship-led economic development with a specific focus of starting with entrepreneurship as the core strategy around economic development. It connects entrepreneurship support, economic development, and community development to create thriving entrepreneurial ecosystems in communities of all sizes across the world. How to become certified if you're interested in it. There's a number of courses that you go through that the IEDC provides. We offer them both in person and opportunities, but also virtually. And there's a minimum of 2 years of paid full-time economic development or entrepreneur support that's a part of the requirement on top of the courses that you take to do this. There are 4 required courses that everyone that goes through the certification process takes, and then several electives that folks can take as well. We want to provide these opportunities in both in-person and virtual because we know that different people learn in different ways. And that there's certainly opportunities in an in-person environment to really build connections, but also as an international organization, we want to create accessibility and opportunity for everyone to be a part of these in as easy a way as possible. So as you think about entrepreneurship and its role in driving equitable economic outcomes, there's a couple of key tips that I would provide to anyone in thinking about how do we drive more equitable economic outcomes through entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship-led economic development. And the first of those is that every community is unique. Every community is going to have its own unique attributes, its own unique assets, and own unique people to build upon. And so while a lot of these attributes can cut across communities and regions and countries, there's also unique aspects. And so you can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach, especially to entrepreneurship. You've got to identify and understand the assets in those communities and the people in those communities, the culture in those communities, to make sure that you're leaving that at the forefront of all of your activities when it comes to driving entrepreneurship. You want to make sure that you're leveraging local institutions. You want to think about the schools, the libraries, the religious affiliations, civic organizations, and colleges. How do we integrate all of those types of organizations that are present in a local community or a region and ensure that they feel like they're part of the entrepreneurship-led economic development approach? It is not always intuitive for those institutions to think about their roles as helping to drive entrepreneurship, but many of those places are innovative in their own unique ways, and including them in these conversations, making sure that you're engaging them in these conversations and helping them feel like they're actually a part of driving entrepreneurship is a really key factor as you think about driving on entrepreneurship-led economic development. You got to educate and empower local leaders and connect them to others doing great work. So often in entrepreneurship, especially from an economic development perspective, can feel very lonely. It can feel like you may be the only one in your community or region doing this. And so connecting people to one another, helping them understand what they've learned along the way, both the positive and the negative, and ensuring that we are building those connections and building a community of folks focused on entrepreneurship is really critical when driving entrepreneurship-led economic development. Another tip, don't try and make a mouse an elephant. You got to start small with pre-existing assets, talent, and natural resources in your community or region. You don't want to try and swallow this process all at once. You want to build from the ground up and ensure that you're embedding this work within your community, within your region, within your country, as you talk about entrepreneurship-led economic development, and really start to build and take small steps as you dive into this. You've got to build the ecosystems themselves. Again, starting from the ground up, you've got to create a network of folks in your community and region that feel like they're engaged in this process, that they've got a voice in this process, and you're truly building an ecosystem from the ground up in your community and region. You want to make sure that your strategies are going to embed wealth locally. So historically in economic development, a lot of times you've seen investments in specific areas of economic development or even in businesses, and the wealth doesn't stay in the community. It's really important and critical to think about it from an entrepreneurship standpoint. How do you embed that wealth locally? How do you provide tools and resources, financing that's going to stay in the community and continue to build that community from the ground up and allow that community to reinvest in itself? And finally, you've got to be able and willing to engage with others. You can't go at this alone. You can't think about your own role as the sole role in building these entrepreneurial ecosystems. You've got to think about how others across the community and region can and should be engaged. You've got to welcome them to your conversations, but you've also got to show up to their conversations and make sure that they feel like not just your priorities are at the table, but their priorities are as well. And finally, you've got to be willing to share your story. If you're not willing to share your story, no one else will do it. And if someone else does, it won't be the story that you want to tell. So you've got to think about all of these strategies when you're focused on driving entrepreneurship as an economic development asset and opportunity, and think about how do you share that story and help others come into the conversation and continue to help you build. It's really critical to think about entrepreneurship as the cutting edge and the leading edge of economic development, because it does help you reinvest in your community. It builds from the ground up. It builds from the assets in your own community and allows you to innovate in ways that make sense for your own community. We're really excited to be a part of this process, to be a part of this conversation in driving entrepreneurship-led economic development, because it helps communities of all sizes, of all regions of the world, to build on their own assets, build new opportunities, and to think about their role in this larger economic development field of how do we drive and embed equitable economic outcomes. Thank you very much, Michael.
I don't want to interrupt you, Professor Tom O'Neill. He will take a place for instead of Charles Ross.
Perfect.
He will present for us new presentations.
Perfect. Is he in here now?
Yes, Tom,
Okay.
Professor Tom.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Tom O'Neill, it's all yours. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, you see my screen?
Yes.
A little bit different talk, but that last one was a really insightful talk. You know, I've been trying to do this for a long time and convincing communities that economic development is really the way to go. Certainly when you want to use innovation and entrepreneurship to do it, as opposed to just going out and try to recruit companies to come in and, you know, buy your companies, right? So it is insightful. It is a long thing. I'm in Orlando, Florida. So when I first started this journey, I mean, it sounds denigrating, but you know, they didn't know how to spell entrepreneur when I got to Orlando. So we spent the last 30 years really trying to get that culture, and it has taken off. But you know, always lots of work to do. It seems it never really ends. So how do you get to the point where, you know, your communities embrace it and stuff? So, and I believe firmly that it's a new engine of global economy. Entrepreneurship is anywhere, especially the innovation-based entrepreneurship. Because I've been all over the world, not all over the world, but I've been lots of places around the world, and there is a huge supply of smart people everywhere I've ever been. So it isn't that someone else, some country has smarter people than other people. They all have smart people. They all do this stuff. So it is these infrastructure you put in. It's the culture. It's the ability to do it. It's political sometimes. Sometimes it's just takes a long time to grow. But you know, a commitment is what you need. And so I appreciate the notion of having champions in your community and convincing that it's really the way to go. Because I've believed in it for a long time now. So it's driving jobs and economic development. It's really increasing private wealth creation for people, and accelerating, you know, the whole notion of personal growth and self-determination as people become more and more, this new generation, self-dependent on themselves and what they're going to do and make their lives. So very good way to do it, and it works well for any place I've seen it. So you're talking about starting a startup now. It's really easier than ever to create one, because it's culturally acceptable now. And the whole notion that people know that maybe your first go around may not be successful. There's people willing to invest in you. There's communities that want to invest in you, and it's global. You know, it's just not limited to any particular place right now. So, and most of the growth and the wealth are in these emerging economies, because some of the ones that are there already have limited growth potential, while the other ones have, you know, literally and virtually unlimited growth. So it's all over the place. There's lots of new technologies going around that people are inventing every day. People have a huge appetite for new and improved, right? So it's a good way to people to separate themselves from what they were doing and do different things, or do what they're doing in a better way. There's people trying to figure out where to put their money and invest. So there's a lot more investment capital out there than ever, regardless of what you might see on the news any given day. I think it's probably easier to get money than it probably ever has been, depending on what kind of money you need and what you're willing to give up to accept it. And you know, the governments are doing it. They, you know, I think there's some enlightened people in government that are trying to make their economies different than it was, and they're investing in themselves now in an enlightened way, knowing that better job for money actually creates more taxes and creates more benefit and more shared resources that people can do together. And this is a graph that I put together, and it really is remarkable. This is the world GDP over the last 400 years. And if you look at what's going on, and I had the same graph for 3,000 years, and it stays the same here. And until the innovation-based economy was envisioned and started happening, it was, you know, GDP was less than $1,000 per person. This is gross domestic product per person. And so, you know, it didn't really increase in the Industrial Revolution, but the innovation-based economy came along, and you see the exponential growth. And this starts kicking in around the 1900s, 1940s, 1960s and 70s really starts to take off. So as you can see, the wealth per person is growing exponentially right now across the world because of the innovation-based economy and people wanting things differently. And we had a person back in 1957 named Robert Solow that showed that 87% of the US growth was driven by technological innovation. So it really was accounting for almost all the growth. And this other person, Paul Romer, coins this phrase, well, you just create new recipes, because you know there is no real new resources in the world, right? So we're taking these resources and putting them together in different ways and solving problems for people. And this is the way we do this. And most of the growth is now coming from new stuff. And I like to show this to people again as a champion in entrepreneurship innovation. In Florida, this is based in Florida. These numbers are almost exactly the same across the US, but if you look at the people that are self-employed, they represent a certain 30% of the jobs, if you will, or 8% of the jobs, and 31% of the businesses in the U.S. are self-employed. The next thing is these companies that are stage 1, I call, which is 2 to 9 employees. They represent 63% of all the companies and about 44% of the jobs. And if you go to the next stage, 99% or less, you can see that, and that's another 5.2% of the jobs in the U.S., but I mean the companies, another 30% of the jobs. So, and you look at the big companies, they really don't represent many companies. They still represent a significant number of jobs. You know, in this case, about 17%. But you know, most of the jobs, 99% of all jobs in my state of Florida have 99 employees or less. So, if you really want to increase the net jobs in a place, this is probably where you need to spend your time and money. Not ignore the big companies, they're a big part of the ecosystem, but most of your jobs are in companies that are 99 employees or less. And in Florida, again, I think this is another stat, stage one and stage 2 companies in Florida created more jobs than were created in Florida. So it was an interesting statistic, because after they made up for all the job losses of the big companies during this particular time frame, then they added to the economy in terms of net new jobs. So it really is an interesting statement. And I say this, and I hope you understand the little language problems. Again, stage 1 and stage 2, which means companies of 99 employees less, exceeded the total net job growth of Florida, because these companies made up for all the losses of the big companies. Here's a couple graphs too, and I say this because there's a difference between an entrepreneurial, innovation-driven company than a small company. And the small companies are really the ones that start at a certain size and stay that way. They're not really looking to grow. The small businesses, this could be your mom and pop shop that want to be a mom and pop shop forever. But the growth-minded companies, and again, the entrepreneurial ones, this is a chart of their growth, and this is a income per capita of the self-employed people versus the entrepreneurial driven companies. And you can see that the income per capita goes up. This is a positive slope, this is a negative slope. So the more of these, the higher percentage of self-employed people you have in a community, the lower the per capita income is going to be, and reverse that the other way around. The larger number of these entrepreneurial growth companies you have in your community, the higher their per capita income is going to be. That's in the US. So this is just a couple of graphs I use to get people to understand what I mean by creating these new things, new recipes. This is a market discontinuity when things are growing, and this is an existing market. Then this better way is introduced. The disruption begins here, and it grows, and it displaces this thing at some time. And there's a new way of doing things. And this cycle gets repeated over and over and over again in a community, especially now, as you know, we do things different all the time. New markets emerge, old markets go away, and people got to know how to recognize this, how to begin these things, realize the benefits of stuff, and keep growing their organizations. So that's when a new solution displaces an old one. How do you create a community where this happens, with rapidity, and people embrace these things? And there's just an example. This is what we're all experiencing right now in the U.S., but in other countries. I think the internal combustion engine is kind of going away. At some point, we don't know when. It's not dead yet, but it'll probably start off with some hybrids, and I think I have one now, which has the engine but has the power to plug it in. And at some point, we will all be driving electric or hydrogen or some other different kind of car. So that's going to be a whole market disruption. And who would have guessed in the 1960s that we'd have electric cars, period, right? So it's growing, it's becoming good, and people are really benefiting for it. Now, this is kind of 100 years, so some of these scales are different. And I teach people about how to, this is something I give for my kids, but how do you get into a different market, understanding what it is. If you're going to really create a new market, this is what you got to live with, that the customers are unknown, this transformational improvement. You have no competitors for at least some period of time, and it's really good. They're gonna take off and do it. So these are the kind of things that I try to educate people with, and how to start these things, and what your ecosystem needs to do it, and how they can grow. And this is kind of a thing I want people to really understand as they're starting these things. And this is how to win. You know, if you're going to start a company and you got to figure out what you're going to do. And there's this differentiation model and there's this low cost model, and they're different, right? So if you're going to be in this market, this is really where most of these innovation-based entrepreneurial companies start off in. This is the two-type business. You know, you have a low margin and a high volume, or a low margin and a low volume. If you do this quad, you're going to have high volume and high margins, or you can have high margins and low volume. So this kind of business is the gold rush. You know, no one gets to survive very long because people always want to be in a high volume, high margin space. So it's good for a while, and there's certain examples where people have done that and done well, and then the market becomes crowded. If you're going to be in low volume that's Death Valley. Nobody ever wants to live there. So the two-type business in the long run, steady state, is this commodity business, which is high volumes and low margins. If you want to win in that marketplace, you do it by reducing your costs and doing things cheaper and more efficient than your competition can do. And the last thing is, again, if you're going to be in this innovation-based economy, you're going to probably have lower volumes, but you're going to have a high margin. And that's how you make it. That's how you create wealth in these innovation-based, entrepreneurial-based economies. Oh, and this is what you think about what the opportunity is. Again, what's the problem? And I always say, as Charles Ross and Wendy Kinney says, so what, who cares, and why you? These are a little expanded sets. What is the problem you're solving? Who really has that problem? Who cares about that problem? What ecosystem is it relevant for? What do people do today? You know, what's the switching cost? They're all doing something. Everybody has some competition. And if you can understand this, what's the technology and the market insight? Why is this problem so hard to solve? Why hasn't someone solved it before? Understanding these are the kind of questions these entrepreneurs in the community needs to reinforce with them to help them become successful. Is it a big problem or a little problem? And how are you going to do it? And this is a way we do things now, which we didn't do. This is based on the I-Core model. The way we used to do is just kind of go off somewhere and spend a weekend by yourself and come up with a business idea. So now we don't do that anymore. We try to search for a legitimate business model. We do things called lean startup. We have customer discovery, and we say that a new business really is just a search engine. These startups search for a viable business model that works at scale, and then if it does, then they scale it up and they execute. So a startup is typically just this stuff. You go on these things, you bring money, you pivot, you go back, you go round and round the circle, you become successful. Search for the right business model before you spend money on execution and creating money. So this is what the new business model looks like for startup communities. And with that, I'm supposed to only go 10 minutes, so I can open up for questions. This is my contact information. Thank you for fitting me in, by the way.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. We do have some extra time. It's about 7 or 8 minutes left here. So I'd be happy to open this up to any questions. Anybody have a comment or a question on anything said by either of the speakers?
Does anybody not want to help promote an innovation-based or entrepreneurial economy? And why not?
I would suspect you'd hear a lot of silence from that question. That's what
They become tired from early morning, Professor Mike. Now we finalize.
All of us too. The question Tom said was, who doesn't favor innovation? Who doesn't think this is a good idea? And my comment was, it's quiet, because I don't think you're going to find too many people who don't favor innovation. Certainly it is proven to work well in the past and well in the future.
Excuse me, Professor Mike, still we have 7 minutes. Professor Tom O'Neill, would you mind please to present iCrop, the NSF initiative in United States? Because someone is asking about the leading initiative. Would you mind to present this initiative and say what is the outcomes and how they...
Real quick.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is okay, so This is, we call it the lean startup methodology. It's called ICOR. ICOR is the National Science Foundation's program to help commercialize a whole lot more of the money they spend on research. And it's really this is a busy slide, but what you're really trying to do with ICOR is reduce the customer risk. Many people spend their lives in the lab, and they could spend 10 years having a breakthrough discovery, and have never talked to anyone outside that lab, outside that building, to see if there's a big demand, to see if it solves any problems in the marketplace. So this lean is a process, it's a methodology. We teach it. It takes advantage of the scientific methods, which a lot of these scientists really do understand better than other things. So adapting that to them is not as hard to sell as trying to have them adopt a business mindset. But you can bring in lean, use the scientific method, go out and do customer discovery, talk to people, collect data, and see if there's a customer need or a market need for what you do. This is written up in the Harvard Business Review, so this is a good article if you want to see it. They think it changed everything. There's a guy named Steve Blank and Jerry Ingalls, which I was trained with. And it really is a different way of thinking, but it's some of the same stuff we've always used in our lives, but the way it's been packaged and the way it's presented makes it much easier for scientists and technical people to get and understand. And I'm doing one right now. This afternoon I have a class, and we have, I think, 50 teams from around the United States going through this thing. And the National Science Foundation actually provides $50,000 per team in funding to help them conduct these customer interviews and go to conferences and get their background. So good stuff. It's all about doing this thing right here. So you help them eliminate the uncertainty of just going to market with something. It reduces the risk for investors, so you can do it. So how can we can increase your success with startups and validate these key learnings? The whole edition is to work smarter, not harder. You're going to we help them develop a minimum viable product, which helps demonstrate to a potential customer base what the product can do and why people care. The whole notion is really to increase your chances of success. I mean, that's all it really boils down to. No program can guarantee any entrepreneur success, as I think many people in this presentation know. So the whole idea behind ICOR, and it's intense. In 7 weeks, we make people go talk to at least 100 individuals. So the first 3 weeks are terrible because a lot of these scientists have never talked to anybody, right? So, and getting to listen, actively listen, and not bring their bias into these conversations, to really find out the true jobs their customers do, the true problems their customers have, and to see if their problem, their case actually solve it. So this is what we do in ICOR. And again, we have a business model canvas we use, which has 9 things. It was developed by a guy named Steve Blank, was a serial entrepreneur, and it was Jerry Ingalls was the other person that did it in his class out in Berkeley. They're both from Stanford and Berkeley in California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. So they use a lot of principles they learned in Silicon Valley to teach this class. And he actually started his class. So this is what we tell people. Certainly, I think everybody probably knows this. More startups fail from a lack of customers than a product, and that's really been true. This is the statistics by First Hits. This is the 10 reasons that companies fail the most, and the number one really is they build something that there wasn't a big market for, and certainly these other things too we'll work on. Hiring poor is number 2. I think everybody understands what it's like to have a staff that's not great, but this is what you need to learn to make successful, is to not do this. Okay, you can reduce your risk by not building something there's not a large demand for. The notion is going to take this core idea and vision and deploy it. So, but we're going to deploy it in a way that reduces people's risk. The usual way that we used to do was, again, have some kind of divine intervention, an idea that pop in your head, build the product, and hope people will show up or not. Right? That's what happened all through people's lives. So with this whole agile and lean way, we learn, we think we have a good idea, we learn again, we come back. So there's this virtual loop where you build a set of hypotheses, build things, run experiments, build minimum viable products, and go out and measure whether these things are true in the thing. spend less money. You hear the expression fail fast. You hear the other expression get out of the building. So the big core to I-Core is go out and talk to people, talk to customers, talk to users, talk to channel, go through the whole business model canvas with them. It's really about this, and this is one of my favorite things. This is Richard Feynman. One of the things we try to do in I-Core is convince people that, you know, the easiest person fools yourself. So we have them take a real hard look at themselves first to be sure that they really understand what their product does, and then go out and talk to people. And the easiest person to fool is probably you. In the I-Core, we don't pick winners, but we try to improve the odds of success, and which is what you want to do. I think it's all there is. So don't fool yourself. And now we understand that most of the folks are great people in their technology. They've worked with them for a long time, but now you need to become an expert in the customer and what they want. And again, I'm not sure how much time I got. This is a long presentation, so I'll stop when we're out of time. But we want these scientists to become an expert in their technology and the customer needs in the market that they're trying to sell these things into. And go talk to customers, find out what jobs they're doing, find out how the customer measures success, right? Rather than themselves. And we teach them that it isn't linear. Most companies, go through some whole set of trial and trauma and stuff before they become successful. And so we teach this. We help them when communities understand as well. So your customer wants a solution because their product or service is not meeting their needs anymore. And sometimes it's for them to meet the needs of their customers. So most companies don't sell directly to the customers anyway. They'll sell business to business. So how do you help these people? Find out first before you start a company what your customers need. And we use this thing called the business model canvas. And I'll do a quick run through that. But this is what your value proposition for a certain set of customers. This is where we spend most of our time in I-Core, is really matching these two things here. Value proposition to customer segments. And once they understand that, we can help figure out how to get to their channels, how to get to their customers, how they grow, attract, and keep customers, how they're going to make money. You'd be surprised how many technical people don't know how to actually make money. So we go through that thing. They may have some idea what things cost, but they don't understand what's important for them to do, what resources they really need to do, and what partners they can develop to do the things they're not really good at. So these 9 building blocks make up the business model canvas, and it's kind of breaking down in 3 parts: what's desirable, what's feasible, and what's viable. And these different sections will help answer these questions. And you do it with people. Desirable is over here. We spend most of our time over there. And these other parts can be worked out later. It takes a little more time once you start building products. And if it's viable, again, do you make enough revenue to make it a profitable business? And we start with humans, so we make them go out and talk to people. What you do and your customer one is what it is, and what we're trying to get is fit. I'll stop there and ask for questions then.
Excellent, Tom. I think that was done exceptionally well. We may have maybe a minute. We're actually running over a little bit. I see my dear friend, Professor Anderson, is here. So I'm going to back off and let Beverly take over for the next session. Thank you all very much. I appreciate everybody being here and listening to these excellent papers.
Nice talking to everybody.
Yep. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Beverly, my pleasure.
Thank you, Professor Mike. Thank you, Professor Tom, for joining.